The coaching habit. Say less, ask more and change the way you lead forever. Author, Michael Bungay-Stanier. Part 2. Cut the intro and ask the question. There's an internet meme about the best opening scene in a James Bond movie. For some people, it's Roger Moore skiing heroically and then parachuting away with a Union Jack emblazoned parachute, naturally, in The Spy Who Loved Me. For others, it's the more gritty black and white moment in Casino Royale when Daniel Craig gets his 00 accreditation by notching up his second kill. My favorite, when Pierce Brosnan bungee jumps over a massive dam in Goldeneye. In any case, you'll notice a pattern here. No James Bond movie starts off slowly. POW. Within 10 seconds you're into the action. The adrenaline has jacked and the heart is beating faster. That's a stark contrast to the way many of us ask a question, which often has a slow, rambling, meandering introduction that feels more like the 1001 Nights of Scheherazade than anything Ian Fleming dreamt up. Cut the preliminary, man. You don't need a runway to pick up speed, you can just take off. If you know what question to ask, get to the point and ask it. And if you must have a lead-in phrase, try out of curiosity. It lessens the heaviness of any question and makes it easier to ask and answer. Here's your new habit. When I've got a question to ask, setting it up, framing it, explaining it, warming up to it, and generally taking forever to get to the moment, I will ask the question and then shut up to listen to the answer. 2. The or question, in which the best coaching question in the world is revealed and you marvel at the power of 3 short words. Real magic. Being a bad amateur magician makes me appreciate the real ones even more. You've probably seen the trick in which the magician is holding up her hand and seems to be producing a coin out of the other, and then another, and then another, and then, if you're watching a certain Penn and Teller video on YouTube, a glint of gold. Google Masters of Magic Penn and Teller. Amazing tricks to see what I mean. Google collective noun for gulge if you're wondering what a glint is. I can't do that trick, not even close. But I can OER you a question that's so good we've actually considered trademarking it as the best coaching question in the world, and it does something similar. The or question. And what else? I know they seem innocuous. 3 little words. But and W hat else, the or question has magical properties. With seemingly no it creates more wisdom, more insights, more self-awareness, more possibilities out of thin air. There are 3 reasons it has the impact that it does. More options can lead to better decisions. You rein yourself in, and you buy yourself time. You channel your inner on. If you've ever watched television in the last 70 years, you'll have bumped into Billy Mays, Vince O'Er or Ron Popeil. They were TV pitch artists selling you the best dicer, grater, cleaning product or mop-up towel that $19.99 plus shipping and handling could buy. Ron Popeil is the grandfather of them all, and his stock phrase was "Bud wait, there's more." While no one here needs you to buy the sham wow, you do want to remember that the RST answer someone gives you is almost never the only answer, and it's rarely the best answer. You may think that's obvious, but it's less so than you realize. Chip and Dan Heath, in their excellent book Decisive: How to Make Better Choices in Life and Work, quote a study by Paul Nutt, a man who may know more than anyone alive about how managers make decisions. Using a rigorous protocol, he reviewed the outcomes of 168 decisions made within organizations. He found that in 71% of the decisions, the choice preceding the decision was binary. It was simply, should we do this, or should we not? Nutt made the point that this percentage was on par with, actually, slightly worse, the ability of teenagers to create options before making decisions. Yes, those terrible decisions teenagers tend to make, and at least teenagers have the excuse that their brains aren't yet fully formed. It's thus no surprise that Nutt found that decisions made from these binary choices had a failure rate greater than 50%. He then looked at the success rate of decisions that involved more choices. For instance, what would happen if you added just one more option? Should we do this, or not? The results were startling. Having at least one more option lowered the failure rate by almost half, down to about 30%. When you use and what else, you'll get more options and often better options. Better options lead to better decisions. Better decisions lead to greater success. You tame the advice monster. If this were a haiku, rather than a book, it would read, tell less and ask more. Your advice is not as good as you think it is. But 17 syllables or not, this is easier said than done. We've all got a deeply ingrained habit of slipping into the advice giver / expert / answer it / solve it / exit mode. That's no surprise, of course. When you take the premium that your organization places on answers and certainty, then blend in the increased sense of overwhelm and uncertainty and anxiety that many of us feel as our jobs and lives become more complex, and then realize that our brains are wired to have a strong preference for clarity and certainty. It's no wonder that we like to give advice. Even if it's the wrong advice, and it often is, giving it feels more comfortable than the ambiguity of asking a question. In our training programs, we call this urge the advice monster. You have the best of intentions to stay curious and ask a few good questions. But in the moment, just as you are moving to that better way of working, the advice monster leaps out of the darkness and hijacks the conversation. Before you realize what's happening, your mind is turned towards needing the answer, and you're leaping into OER ideas, suggestions and recommended ways forward. There's a place for giving advice, of course. This book isn't suggesting that you never give anyone an answer ever again, but it's an overused and often ineffective response. An intriguing, albeit difficult, exercise is to watch yourself and see how quickly you get triggered into wanting to give advice. Give yourself a day, or half a day, or an hour, and see how many times you are ready and willing to provide the answer. A much quoted 1984 study by Howard Beckman and Richard Frankel found that the average time to interruption for doctors was 18 seconds. And while we can all roll our eyes and say those doctors, I've seen plenty of managers and leaders who bat a similar average. In short, even though we don't really know what the issue is or what's going on for the person, we are quite sure we've got the answer she needs. And what else breaks that cycle? When asking it becomes a habit, it's often the simplest way to stay lazy and stay curious. It's a self-management tool to keep your advice monster under restraints. You by yourself sometime. This is a secret, just between you and me, as I'm sure I must have mentioned and put in caps and underlined in my bio somewhere in this book. I was the RST Canadian Coach of the Year. So I'm whispering this to you as a professional, respected and decorated coach. When you're not entirely sure what's going on and you need hear an interview with Dan Coyle at the Great Work podcast, just a moment or two to go things out. Asking and what else buys you a little extra time, but that's on the down low. Don't tell anyone else. 4 practical tips for asking and what else. To make sure the magic of what happens, follow a few simple guidelines. Stay curious, stay genuine. Just because you've now got a fabulous question to use, that doesn't mean you can slip into a bored groove when asking it. As you build this habit, don't just practice asking and what else. Use Dan Coyle's principles of deep practice from the chapter on habit building and get used to asking the question with genuine interest and curiosity. For bonus points, practice listening to the answers. Ask it one more time. Let's start with the understanding that as a general rule, people ask this question too few times rather than too many. And the way to master this habit is to try it out and experiment and see what works. As a guideline, I typically ask it at least 3 times and rarely more than 5. Recognize success at some stage of the conversation. Someone's going to say to you, there is nothing else. When that happens, a perfectly reasonable reaction is a rapid heartbeat and slight panic. Reframe that reaction as success. There is nothing else is a response you should be seeking. It means you've reached the end of this line of inquiry. Take a breath, take a bow, and go on to another question. Move on when it's time. If you can feel the energy going out of the conversation, you know it's time to move on from this angle. A strong wrap it up variation of and what else is there anything else? That version of and what else invites closure while still leaving the door open for whatever else needs to be said. And what else is the quickest and easiest way to uncover and create new possibilities. Going too far, the paradox of choice. Options are good. The power of and what else is that it's the quickest and easiest way to uncover and create new possibilities. But having lots and lots and lots of options isn't always best. Barry Schwartz, author of The Paradox of Choice, he gives a good TED talk of the same name. brought to light a study of consumers in a grocery store. It was jam day, and one sample table had 6 varieties, the other, 24. While the table with 24 types of jam was more popular, consumers sampling from the table of 6 favors were 10 times more likely to actually buy jam. The overwhelm of 24 favors created decision-making paralysis. Neuroscience has something useful to add to this conversation. The starting point for it was a 1956 paper by George A. Miller, whose title tells you exactly what its conclusion was: the magical number 7, plus or minus 2, some limits on our capacity for processing information. Science has whittled that number down over time, so now it's generally assumed that 4 is actually the ideal number at which we can chunk information. In some ways, it's as if our unconscious brain counts like this: 1, 2, 3, 4 lots. That probably explains why we can remember the names of people in 4-person bands, but not of those in bands of 5 or more. So as you ask, and what else? The goal isn't to generate a bazillion options. It's to see what ideas that person already has, while actively stopping you from leaping in with your own ideas. If you get 3 to the answers, then you've made great progress indeed. Finding the right moment, and what else, is such a useful question that you can add it into almost every exchange. For example, when you've asked someone, "What's on your mind?" and she answers, "Ask, and what else?" When someone's told you about a course of action she intends to take, challenge her with, "And what else could you do?" When you're trying to find the heart of the issue, and you ask, "What's the real challenge here for you?" and he offers up a timid or vague or insipid first answer, push deeper by asking, "And what else is a challenge here for you?" When you start your weekly check-in meeting by asking, "What's important right now?" keep the pressure on by asking, "And what else?" When someone's nudging a new idea to the fore, exploring new boundaries of courage and possibility, hold the space and deepen the potential by asking, "And what else might be possible?" When you're brainstorming new ideas and you don't want to get bogged down, keep the energy up by firing out, "And what else?" Build your new habit here. When this happens right out the moment, the person and perhaps the feelings that are your trigger, "And what else?" works so well because it keeps people generating options and keeps you shut up. So, the trigger here is the opposite of that. It's when someone has given you an idea, when you want to give some advice, when you're sure you know the answer and are desperate to tell him, or when he hasn't yet said, "There is nothing else." Write out the old habit you want to stop doing. Be specific. The old habit will be largely about reverting to advice giving and moving into solution mode sooner than you need to. It could be going with the RST idea, or even the second idea, or even the third idea, telling people the brilliant idea you've got before they've shared all their ideas, assuming you know the problem and or the solution, or taking control and wrapping up the conversation. I will describe your new habit. It's almost certainly something like, I will ask them, "And what else?" Ask the right questions if you're going to find the right answers. Vanessa Redgrave. Watch it work. Watch the short videos at thecoachinghabit.com/videos to deepen your learning and help turn insight into action. The one question that rules them all, with a nod to J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Michael delves into just why and what else should be the first question you seek to master. If we are claiming that "and what else" is the best coaching question in the world, and make no mistake, we are, then it's useful to understand the science behind the question. When we put the challenge to our researcher, Lindsay, she came back with a couple of compelling insights. The RST paper she cited has held up for more than 80 years, since it was published in 1929. The study found that when students were owed a second pass at a number of true or false questions, this deliberate reconsideration helped students get more answers correct. These students performed better than a second set, who also got a second pass, but didn't write down their answers during the RST pass. This group performed worse than the RST set of students. So, it seems that committing to an answer and then having a chance to react on it creates greater accuracy. More recent studies have found that follow-up questions that promote higher-level thinking, like "and what else?" help deepen understanding and promote participation. The second study Lindsay found involves psychologists picking on 3-year-olds by getting them to do something naughty, peek at a toy, and then asking them if they'd peeked. About half of the kids who had peak lead and denied doing it, only for most of them to immediately, accurately, and revealingly answer the question, "What's the toy?" We are not that different from young kids. There's usually something else there waiting to be unearthed by the simple act of asking, and the your question is one of the most effective ways of doing that. If you enjoyed this audiobook and want to hear again, be sure to click that subscribe button and click also the notification bell to switch between getting all notifications, and like and share. Leave your comment and suggestion below. Thanks for watching.